Blood everywhere.
Peace. Okay. We're studying plants now?
Yeah.
It's section 21.1.
Woohoo!
And the first thing we're going to talk about is plant evolution. And we think that plants came from green algae. What happened was green algae, the stuff that we looked at in the microscope, some of the stuff like, do you remember the spirogyra? It was stringy green algae. That stuff was floating around in the oceans for billions of years, or at least probably half a billion years. And some of it would wash on land and would die. But some of it evolved the ability to survive on land for short periods of time. And so we have reason to believe that present-day plants and algae share a common ancestor. And there's a bunch of reasons why that they list in the book. They both have cell walls made of cellulose. They both form a cell plate during cell division. Remember that dividing line in the middle?
Yep.
They use the same type of chlorophyll in photosynthesis.
More like chlorophyll.
They have similar genes for ribosomal RNA. They store their food as starch. They have the same types of enzymes in their vesicles. So there's a lot of similarities between green algae and plants. So we think plants came from green algae. Green algae that somehow evolved to be able to live on the land. After God did it. Whoops, how do we go forward? Now,
Fish.
one of the things that allows plants to survive on land was the evolution of cuticle, a waxy layer, a layer of wax that's on the surface of all leaves. And stems too, often, depending on what type of plant it is. If it's a non-woody plant, the stems are also covered with this waxy layer. Now this is an electron microscope view, 145 times enhanced, but you can see there's this layer of wax on the top of a leaf. Have you ever felt a leaf?
Yes.
It feels waxy?
Yeah.
Is that the cuticle?
What's the purpose of it? Yeah.
Keep stuff off it.
It's not really, it can help keep stuff off of it. But what else could it do?
Protects it.
Has to do with water.
Does it roll the water down into it?
Stores water.
Nope.
Repels it.
Haven't heard it yet.
Water just goes off of it.
Water
It does, but
attracts the water. It's like a magnet.
Sucks up the
Kinda like
water.
gets the water to go in a certain
Prevents
direction.
evaporation.
it prevents the leaf, or the plant, from drying up. If you're living on land, but not in the water, you have to make sure that there's a way that you don't dry out too fast. Because it's very dry out here in the air. The air is very dry. And if you take some algae and you set it on the land, it'll lose all its water very quickly. Plants don't do that. Plants have a waxy layer. The water stays inside. Yes?
We have a waxy layer?
No, we have a layer of skin that's waterproof.
Oh, we do?
Yeah. Your skin doesn't let water
It's got
escape.
white stuff.
It's skin droop.
Well, they gotta be white.
And maybe you've got water in your butt. You know, flip it.
Now, another thing.
Actually black. Absolutely.
My turn. Leaves have to hold in their water, but at the same time, they have to also let gases enter.
Is that a vacuole? That's
Hold on, I'll tell you what it is. Now, at some point, leaves have to open up and let some air get inside the leaf, because the air holds carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is used for photosynthesis. So all leaves have little holes. Usually it's on the underside of the leaf. They're called stomata, or stoma singular. This is a stoma, and plural it's stomata. And they're little cells that open and close like this. Each time they open, some air gets in. And then they'll close. because they don't want to let water out. It's important to keep water in if you're on land. Drying out is a big problem for anything that doesn't live in the ocean. So, in order to to be able to open up and let some carbon dioxide in, but not lose too much water, they'll shut the stoma. So stomas are like little mouths that open and close and let oxygen in.
They even look like a little man.
We're going to go in just a few minutes. We're going to go down and get some leaves and try and find these stoma under a microscope.
Cool.
Should be
Sounds
exciting
exciting.
stuff.
Will they open and close so we can see them?
I don't think they will while you're looking at them, but you
Okay.
tell me if they do. I don't know.
Okay.
Now, the next thing that plants evolve when you live on land, you have to have vascular tissue if you're going to grow to any height. Vascular tissue is tubes that are inside the plant
We have those?
that can move water up a plant.
We have that?
We have those.
We have blood vessels, which kind of do the same sort of thing. Plants are rooted in the ground, and there's lots of water underground. The water has to be moved from the ground up into the plant. In a tall tree, there are tubes that go all the way from the roots, all the way up the plant, all the way to the branches. Did you learn the names of these tubes in middle school?
Vascular tube?
They're called vascular tubes, but they have names. No?
Yeah.
They're called xylem and phloem. Xylem and phloem tubes.
Flow.
Xylem tubes are like big tubes, and the big tubes move water up and down a plant. Xylem. And here it shows a carrot. Carrots actually have tubes inside them. Carrots are roots. I don't know if you knew that. That pull water up. This water is absorbed from the ground, and water goes up through these tubes and up through thin tubes and into the leaves.
So I just ate a root if I ate a carrot?
That's right.
So what's
A
the
root that stores food as well as moves water.
what's the difference between the xylem
Supposed to like
tube
20
and
roots.
whatever the other kind of tube?
Phloem.
Yeah.
Phloem is a tube that actually transports mostly sugars, and usually sugars move down a plant because sugars are made in the leaves by photosynthesis and then must be stored in the roots. So the phloem moves sugars down plants, and the xylem moves water up plants. And both of these are a system of tubes, and a plant could not grow to any height without these tubes because there would be no way to get water up to the top of the plant. Yes?
How come when you cut a tree open you don't see those tubes?
You do see them. They're microscopic though. They're real small.
You
But
just
have you ever
read
seen
it.
tree rings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason why the rings form are different sizes of xylem tubes.
I thought that told you how many years old the tree is.
It does, because the xylem tubes grow faster or slower depending on what season it is.
Oh.
Xylem tubes grow fast in the spring and summer, and thus the xylem cells are wider and look white. And xylem grows slow in the fall and winter, and the xylem tubes are smaller and look dark. So what you see is light, dark bands as every year the tree does that. It grows out now. The wider tree is, the older it is. But we're going to study that later. We're going to look at tree rings.
What's the oldest tree in the world? Just like,
The bristlecone pine.
is that in Africa?
It's in California.
California.
Yeah.
How old is it?
Guess.
About 135 million.
4 billion years.
No, 4,000 years.
Oh,
Gosh. If that tree could tell stories,
3 and 5, so it's even
Yeah.
it would have seen
yeah. Jesus.
never mind.
What'd you say?
I don't know
I've
what
seen
I'm
a lot of things.
Yeah, those trees were first started growing at the time of the Egyptian pyramids, and they're still there. The page 607 talks about seeds. Here's another thing that plants needed because they were away from water. They needed to be able to transport their young. The way algae transport their young is the sperm and egg fertilize one another, and then the zygote floats away.
In
And
the
leaves
water?
the parent by floating away.
In the water?
In the water, yeah. Never leaves the water. The water carries it. Well, if you're a tree on land, how are you going to get your children away?
Acorns.
Well, you put your children, here's the embryo, that's the child, into a seed. This big thing is a seed. A seed has a food source that the embryo can eat, and it has a seed coat that's really tough and can withstand some harsh conditions. And then often it will attach something to the seed. For instance, pine trees attach a wing. You ever seen those things? It's like a helicopter. And it drops from the pine tree and spins around, and the wind will blow it for maybe 50 yards, 100 yards, and hopefully it'll land far enough from the parent where it can get sunlight and grow. Flowering plants do a different thing. What they do is they grow their seeds inside a fruit. They drop the fruit, an animal comes along, eats the fruit because it's juicy, it's got sugars in it that the plant put in there on purpose to attract an animal to eat it. The animal eats it, the seed coat is so tough it can make it through the digestive system of the animal. The animal goes off, maybe a mile or so, somewhere else, goes to the bathroom.
There it is.
The seeds make it all the way through, and they have fertilizer so they can grow.
Boom.
So, if I
Automatic
eat
plant.
like an apple and all the seeds in the apple,
If you don't flush it down the toilet, if you pooped it out in the field, you might grow an apple tree there.
Ha ha ha. Let's do it.
you're doing that.
It might give you a different method that Johnny Appleseed used.
Probably not, though.
Probably not.
Should I have to bury it?
That would take a long time.
There'll be a lot of apples.
No, you don't have to bury it. The roots will grow down. We'll also grow some plants in here. Now, here's something we need to all learn. It's on page 608. Turn to 608. 608, very important. These are all the different types of plants.
Is this the essay?
The essay for chapter 20 and 21 is describe the detailed characteristics of nutrition and reproduction of fungi, and then describe characteristics and examples of a phylum of non-vascular, seedless vascular, and vascular seed plants.
Yes, this is it.
No,
Non-vascular, seedless vascular, and vascular seed. There are three major groups of plants. Non-vascular plants. Guess what non-vascular plants don't have?
Vascular tubes.
Vascular tubes.
What?
What can you guess about a plant that doesn't have any vascular tubes? What would you guess about the way it's built?
It grows on the ground.
It's small. It grows right next to the ground. They're real tiny plants.
Like
those are your non-vascular plants. Your liverworts, your mosses, and your hornworts are the three groups of non-vascular plants.
Like grass?
We're going to have to memorize all these phylum names.
How does moss get in a tree?
Liverworts. Oh, that's Spanish moss. That's different. They have floating seeds. Spanish moss aren't this moss. Spanish moss are actually flowering plants. These mosses I'm talking about are the green, hairy-looking things that you see on rocks next to waterfalls. Those are those mosses. So we got liverworts, mosses, and hornworts. And you might want to go ahead and make this list. These are all the phylum names. I want to make sure I spell these right. Hepatocophyta.
That's for liverworts?
Are the liverworts. You got to memorize all these. They'll all be on the next test. Make note cards. Bryophyta.
Biophyta.
Are the mosses. Anthocerophyta. Are the hornworts.
Oh, it is in the book.
It is in the book on page 609.
Did we turn a light on by chance?
No.
Why?
Please don't.
They found me wall.
Sorry that I can't see the board.
Come sit up front. I guess there's no reason we don't have to turn the light on.
Thanks, Jay. I'm sorry that I want to see. I'm bad.
Right here.
Are you blind?
So those are the non-vascular plants. They don't have any veins or vessels, so they grow really small. Because you need vessels if you're going to grow tall to transport the water up and down. But then came vascular tissue. And now we have the non-seed vascular plants. There's 3 types: ferns, horsetails, and club mosses. Ferns, horsetails, club mosses. And by the way, we're going to be learning about these for the next 2 or 3 days in here. About all of these. The ferns are pterophyta.
So are the horsetails.
Oh, so are the horsetails.
What?
Pterophyta.
Is there a
You know how I remember that?
Uh,
I'm terrified of ferns. Pterophyta. Ferns.
Terrified
I'm
of
terrified
horses.
of ferns. I'm scared of them.
and
What if you're
Ferns
terrified of
scare me.
horsetails?
Terrified of horsetails too.
horsetails pretty cool.
Pterophyta. And then club mosses are lycophyta.
So what's the difference between a club moss and a moss?
I'll show you when we get to club mosses. It has to do with their structure.
Alright.
A moss doesn't have vascular tissue, a club moss does. And then finally at the top, we have
So the first 3 are what kind of plants?
They're non-vascular.
non-vascular.
And
This is
then,
it right
and
here.
then
wondering,
it's
on
non-vascular
the
seed.
non-seed plants, how would they like produce other plants?
Yeah, they use spores.
Oh,
Sporozoans?
yeah, about this.
They use spores.
Wait, so they're non-vascular, the ones that we're doing now, though?
These are
These are
non-vascular.
vascular.
These are vascular non-seed. These are vascular non-seed, meaning they never develop seeds, they still use spores. These guys up here use spores too. A spore is a little cell that you release and it floats through the air and it lands somewhere and it can grow a new plant. It's a little bit, it's like a seed, but a little bit different. It's a, and we'll talk about the differences later. I don't want to get into that now. But all these reproduce using spores, and now the rest of these use seeds. Cycads are cycadophyta. Cycads, also known as sagopalms. Have you ever heard of a sagopalm? We got them out front.
I have heard of a sagopalm.
That's cycadophyta.
I guess say those don't
So we got
Gnetophyta
Huh?
are the joint furs. Joint furs. Ginkgophyta. You ever heard of ginkgo biloba?
Nope.
couple times.
I've heard of a ginkgo leaf.
Yeah, that's the ginkgophyta.
Yeah, no,
Panda, Kung Fu Panda.
yeah.
The something warrior has been known to survive on the dew of a ginkgo leaf.
Yeah.
Coniferophyta.
Yeah, the dragon warrior. That's what I'm talking about.
Biology from that.
Pines and
Do what?
Biology from that.
similar plants.
It's a good one.
Coniferophyta, the conifers. They have cones. And then finally, the biggest group of all, Anthophyta,
Versus the energy of the universe.
the flowering plants.
And the dew of a ginkgo leaf.
Did they, in the book, did they leave a word out on the conifer varieties? It says pines and similar plants, or colon, or semicolon,
And Anthophyta is the last one. And all these,
Where's joint ferns?
All these are vascular seed
You
plants.
just shot a marker into the box and shot the cap off into the box.
Not all of them.
Gosh, dang.
What's not?
What's
Ellen,
joint?
did I say and?
Ellen, you didn't even get on
And's the
camera.
last one.
Which one? What's that?
What's joint first?
Bro, do you know
What are joint furs?
Which one's that? I wrote the ones down on the list.
Neophyta.
There's no neophyte up there.
Neophytes?
Oh, no. Not sure.
I'm gonna need a lot more than some energy juice and a.
If you could make flashcards and learn which one goes to which phylum, that's 3 or 4 questions on the test right there. Okay? People who don't do that are just going to miss those questions because they won't know what's going on.
Why?
So no reason to miss those.
Why do you make all those questions on the test? Like,
Because there's more to the chapters than just
We don't need more. That's all we need to know.
So that's what we're going to do the next two or 3 days. We're going to study a day on these, a day on these, and a day on these.
Oh, shit.
Something like that.
Hold on.
And I'm going to show you examples, and we'll go outside and we'll find some too, and we'll look at them.
is that
Now, here's what we're going to do for the next 10 minutes. We're going to go down outside, out front,
Yes.
and you're going to grab some leaves.
Yes.
And I don't care what you get them from.
We get 10, 15 minutes.
Good. Yeah, 15 minutes. We get as many different types of leaves as you can. And then what you're going to do is you're going to come back up. Let's say that this was a leaf. I know it's not a leaf, but let's just
I
pretend.
bet it was made by a leaf.
it was?
Everybody.
And you're going to cut with scissors, take your leaf, and you're going to cut with scissors a tiny piece off of it. It only has to be that big or so, off your leaf. And I want you to put it on a microscope slide with a drop of water. I want you to look at it under the microscope. Now, I want you to look at the bottom side of the leaf. And what we're looking for are the stomata. These little holes right here. And some types of leaves, they're real hard to find, and you may not be able to see them at all. In other types of leaves, they're real easy to find. It just depends on the leaf.
What type of leaves are these?
You go and get all the leaves you want. You can get a piece of grass. You can get a couple of leaves from trees. Bring up 4 or 5 different types of leaves, and let's make these slides and see if we can find them. Did you turn the
No.
thing off?